Hello and welcome to Oh God What Now, bringing you 60 minutes of hurt twice a week. I'm Andrew Harrison and I've dried my tears on my World in Motion t-shirt, primarily because we won't get to do a Cole Palmer, Keir Starmer headline after all, like I had planned. Every Friday we say something crazy might happen over the weekend, and this time it actually did, with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump at a campaign event in Pennsylvania. We're going to be talking about the enormity of the potential consequences, not just for the presidential election, but for the stability of the United States. Could there really be a second civil war? Plus, it's exquisite agony at the very last minute for the England men's football team yet again, after a lacklustre tournament for the national team enlivened by just a few miracle goals. A win, we were told, would have brought the country together. But do sporting feel-good moments really affect politics? Let's say hello to the panel. Ros Taylor is the author of The Future of Trust and the writer and presenter of our companion series Jam Tomorrow, which starts its third series this very day. Isn't that right, Ros?
That's right, it does. And I've learned a lot. I've learned that the green belt is an immensely powerful idea, but it's also a myth. It was never really supposed to be green at all. But because the people who live on and near it are generally well off and often have time to spare, it has this huge pull on the collective imagination, which is very hard to shake. So, yeah, Labour have got a big task on their hands, but they need to remind people of what the green belt was originally for, and also show that they care about countryside per se, which I think will go a long way to helping stuff. This episode also features Oh God What Now regular John Elledge.
There you go. Well, if you're a Patreon backer, you've already got it, because we're putting Jam Tomorrow on the Patreon feed as well. For everybody else, search Jam Tomorrow in your favourite podcast app. Ros, you are also the Oh God What Now prison correspondent.
Always yes, in and out. That's where I am. Can't keep away
within these walls with Ros Taylor. Yes. This week, Labour is being lambasted by the Tory press for doing exactly what the Conservatives were planning to do 6 weeks ago, letting prisoners out early. Does this really have the makings of the first crisis of the Starmer era, or is it something that everybody's going to have to own?
Well, it is a crisis, but it was a crisis before. Actually, the Tories were letting people out early. They just weren't making any kind of fuss about it. They were just doing it on the quiet. I think it's a good thing to have done this early enough that it's clearly, the blame can clearly be laid at the Tories' door. And Shabana Mahmood can come in and say, look, I've inherited a terrible, terrible mess, and we need to do something urgently. The problem is that letting people out early from September, which is the plan, may not even be early enough, because prisons could even be full within days. I was just talking to Lord Ken MacDonald, who's a former Director of Public Prosecutions. Do you know anyone else who's a former Director of Public Prosecutions?
I can think of somebody.
Yeah, well, he was the DPP before Keir was the DPP. So
I was DPP before you was for DPP.
Yeah, he has thoughts, and they're pretty sobering. Labour has a big job to do, especially, it's not just the prisons, of course, it's the courts, it's probation, it's the whole system.
And he's going to be talking to you on the bunker, isn't he? Never not be podcasting. We're podcasting all day, all the time. Also with us, it's writer, commentator, actor, cook, and human Swiss Army knife, Alex Andreou. Hello, Alex.
Hi.
So something that got a little bit lost in the turmoil of the weekend was that Starmer has said that he'll keep the BBC licence fee, sort of putting an end to 14 years of outright hostility from the government. Dorries said that the last settlement was the last one ever. She clearly overspoke herself.
Read the plot.
Read the plot, yes. Starmer now says we're committed in our manifesto to the BBC and to the licensing scheme. Does this mean the BBC is basically safe, or is, the lack of any money at all going to come back and haunt it?
No, I think this is fantastic news, and it's very good to finally be putting that constant threat, that constant lever used as a threat to bed. I think when people talk about the BBC and talk about its function and where it's going well and where it's going badly, they tend to mean BBC News. And I was pulled up on this quite recently, and I think it's a useful distinction to make, because the BBC as a whole is actually doing incredibly well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's generating, I was looking at some stats, 20,000 jobs in the BBC, 53,000 jobs across the UK as a result of BBC productions, and a further 1.7 jobs for every one of those in the wider economy. It's made 4.9 billion to the UK economy, and that's 1.5 billion more than if it were performing in line with industry average. So, I mean, it's a really good organization, but the charter is coming up for renewal in 2027, and I think governance needs sorting out. It shouldn't be a situation where you just appoint your mates to the board and clearly politically biased people to run it and run the news division and all of that stuff. It really, if it's going to be independent, the process of governance needs to be made properly independent, I think.
Completing the panel, it's political journalist, author, and, we learned this week, lifelong insomniac Marie Leconte, who just described herself before we started recording as a broken woman.
Hi, I'm so pleased to be here.
Well, you cover Parliament with shoe leather on the ground. It's been a brilliant first week in Parliament for Reform UK, who decided to compare themselves to the movie Reservoir Dogs without checking to find out that everybody in the film falls out with one another and then kills each other at the end. How's it going in the House of Farages team of 5?
So I will say that I really enjoyed the fact that The Sun actually reported on that kind of Reservoir Dog thing. As far as I can tell, without questioning it either. And it's a bit like, has anyone seen this movie?
How has anybody not
Yeah.
seen this movie? It's a huge movie, for God's sake.
So I've actually not seen it because I'm really squeamish about
You're
blood.
weird.
But also I have Wikipedia. But yeah, I will say so it's not going tremendously. So Ben Habib, who was the deputy leader, the co-deputy leader, actually, sorry, very Green Party of them, of Reform, got kicked out by Nigel Farage, who decided to appoint Richard Tice as deputy leader instead, which, to be fair, not to be mean to Ben Habib, a man I know practically nothing about, but Richard Tice did used to be leader of Reform when the election was called, and then Farage was like, hello, I want my old job back now, goodbye. So it seems fair to be like, okay, fine, you can still get a job.
Having sunk millions into the whole thing.
But no, so my favourite thing this week is actually the quote from Farage saying, "These appointments are the first step to ensure that Reform UK is fit and ready to take forward its positive message." And B, I think days later, he just fucked off to the US to hang out with Trump. And it's a bit like, okay, that's a weird, but you're by then. So yes, I think it's going tremendously, really, for Reform
And
in
Lee
Parliament.
Anderson's chief whip.
Oh, God, yeah.
But how can you have
She's
chief whip?
basically the WhatsApp group admin.
I know you've got chief whip over like, 4 people?
Yeah.
That makes me chief whip of this room. I'm insisting on things.
But my counterpoint would be, have you seen the Reform MPs, though? Like, it's a bit like, there's only 4 of them, but my God.
Yeah.
So I don't envy the chief whip.
At 6 p.m. on Friday, our main concern with the American election was if and when Joe Biden would quit as Democratic candidate. The shooting of Donald Trump by 20-year-old gunman Thomas Matthew Crooks at a campaign event in Pennsylvania has changed the landscape utterly. The incident shocked the world, produced an iconic photograph of a bloodied Trump pumping his fist, an image of incalculable political power, and cranked up America's already poisonous divisions to new heights. Republicans are claiming that the incident has effectively won the election for Trump. The MAGA right is squarely and personally blaming Biden. Conspiracists insist that the incident was staged, and there is talk of civil war. While Biden has condemned the attack and called for the political temperature to be lowered, it is unlikely that the Republican National Convention starting today in Milwaukee will de-escalate matters. I want to ask everybody first, what were your immediate thoughts when you heard about this? Because the news came in late at night on a Saturday. For me, it was a surreal shock because I had a kitchen full of Americans staying over, and the horror in the room, like people had their heads on the kitchen table. Ros, how did you hear and what did you think?
I woke up in the morning and I checked the BBC News app in my normal sad way about 5:30 a.m. and I saw the news. I think that my first thought was, God, thank God he hasn't actually been assassinated, because that would be the trigger for, I just can't begin to imagine what. And then I thought, right, now he survived it, he's going to milk this for all it's worth.
Yeah. Marie, how about you?
I was actually staying in that night, so I was just in bed and then watching a TV series. And I just checked my phone because there was suddenly lots of messages in a group chat. So I opened it and I just saw something about, do we have any idea who the shooter was? And I was like, the what? What? Hang on, what? So I kind of like scrolled up. Then it's like, what? And so like ran metaphorically like to Twitter. No, what I think kind of same with as Ros. The first thing was, oh Christ, is he okay? Definitely not, to be clear, because I really personally care massively about the physical state of Donald Trump, but because of what would have been unleashed if he'd really not been well. And yeah, and then I think there was a really good tweet, which I'm going to butcher here, but someone posted that it was very eerie to be a real life or like real time witness to something where everything has changed, but you don't know how it's changed
yet. Yes, I saw that. Yeah, it's like everything has changed, but you are completely unsure of exactly how and in what direction it's going to go.
So it was definitely one of those moments of thinking, oh, wow, okay, this is a game changer. But a bit like, and again, I think it's been a really weird week. Only a few days before that, I was also just about to go to bed and then saw the Joe Biden, Zelensky, Putin thing. And similarly, I was like, that's a turning point of sorts. I'm not sure where it's going to lead. So I think having that twice in not that long was very odd, and especially again twice just as I was about to go to bed. So yeah, the insomnia you mentioned earlier has not been helped by that, I would say.
Alex, how about you?
I was watching the news,
Okay.
so I saw it all unfold live. I was actually watching CNN USA, and they were showing the event live when it happened, and so my first reaction was very, very different because it looked very minor. At first glance, the pops sounded as if they came from a BB gun, and there was momentary confusion. No one knew what was going on, and so my first reaction was, there's been some sort of incident. Yeah. And it's actually only when news began to filter in. It wasn't even when you could see there was some blood on his ear. It was only when the news filtered through that someone in the audience had died that you knew this was a real shooting, if that makes sense, rather than someone with an air rifle sort of trying to cause a commotion.
Yeah.
And so that was really quite extraordinary. I'm delighted. I didn't say anything online. Something in me went, wait, wait before you tweet a hot take.
Yeah. I mean, the most obvious question is the most important one. How does this change the election? Because it clearly does, but how? I mean, Ros, we've got a situation now where this time last week, we had an increasingly doddery Biden on the ropes being advised over and over by his own people that he needed to withdraw. A Trump who was kind of, not really doing anything different from what he'd done previously, just maintaining that level of energy and offensive. But now we have a Trump who can present himself to the world as this kind of bloodied but unbowed, defiant figure. In what way do you think it changes the election?
I think it changes it in Trump's favour, very much so, partly because it makes it less likely that the Democrats will move against Joe Biden anytime very soon, although probably shouldn't, but it will. And I think a lot depends now on exactly how Trump reacts to it and the decisions he will take about how to portray himself. Now, we've clearly got the, I'm a survivor, I'm a hero narrative. But will he start going down full-blown conspiracy mode? Will he do that, which must be tempting for someone like Trump? Or will he try and be more dignified about it? And I think we've seen the early signs of that. We can talk about that later on. But I think it shows us actually how fragile human life is, as every near assassination does, and why the destiny of a country can't lie in any one man, whether that's Trump or whether that's Biden.
You're saying bad idea to have a president, have a cabinet.
No, I'm saying that you can't put all your eggs in one basket forever. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. What do you think, Alex?
So I think it has been overreacted to in terms of the effect it will have on the election. It definitely, the most significant effect it does have is actually the Democrats, what they do with Joe Biden. And I tend to agree with Rose, it makes it less likely for them to move against him, because to do so, they would need to do so really in the next 10 days. And with this kind of instability now being added into the mix, I can't see them adding more instability into that particular pot, even though it does actually make it more urgent for them to move against him, because, that image and all of that makes Trump look even sort of stronger.
Yeah.
And also because it gives him a weird window to say that for whatever reason, I have become part of this polarization that says Trump is a saint, Biden is the devil, or vice versa. And now is a good time actually to step back and let someone else take over who maybe can unite the country. So it provides an intellectual window, but I don't see it happening just because of the timing.
Yeah, it also, I mean, Trump has been, I'm not going to say conciliatory, but he has been nowhere near as combative as you might expect here. He has
Let's see. He hasn't made his speech yet.
But he has, the things that he's floated are the idea of the country coming together.
No, those are the things his team has floated.
Well, no, he's floated it himself in an interview with the Washington Examiner, and the kind of the unspoken part of it is the country can come together behind me.
Controlled environments. Let's see what happens when he takes to the podium at the convention and goes off auto cue, shall we? Because that is the danger zone for Trump. I mean, both of them are trying to be statesmanlike and bring down the temperature, which is to their credit. The real question is that for one of them that is broadly in character and for the other one that's broadly out of character, and every instinct in him will want to be that guy that pumps the fist and goes fight, fight, fight.
Yeah.
Right? So let's see how he reacts to that. I think the analysis and the hot takes that I've heard are far, far too premature in my view. We know this will have effects. We know that it will galvanize Trump's base, which is already incredibly galvanized. It will increase turnout, which will probably be helpful to Trump. But there are other second-order effects that maybe this talk of he's now got it in the bag will depress Trump's turnout and galvanize Biden's base. So those second-order effects and what it does for floating voters will depend on what narrative they attach to it. If they see Trump as a hero of this whole affair, it might move a whole load of, undecideds to Trump's column. If undecideds see Trump as the creator, the architect of this environment of chaos and violence, it might move a whole load of them into Biden's column. So I think 4 months is a very, very long time in this kind of environment. You don't know what's coming down the line. The two candidates are 77 and 81 to point out just one obvious thing that might happen next week that completely derails this whole thing. So let's just take a breath.
Marie, what are you thinking about how it affects you all?
I agree with what they both said. The two things I'd add, the first one is that I think we should never underestimate the extent to which the Dems just kind of love losing, or like, I was just so obsessed with the idea they're going to lose. It is the famous Simpsons joke, isn't it? The DNC with the big banners saying we hate ourselves and we can't govern. And I worry that that's going to get massively into the heads of Democrats. And we've seen, I think, Twitter since the attack happened has kind of been wall-to-wall left-wing Americans going, well, Trump has won, that's it, there's nothing we can do. And I worry that kind of like deep-seated pessimism that is on the left in the US and on the centre will just get worse as a result.
And become self-fulfilling.
Well, exactly. And the second thing is, we still, I find it really weird. Like, it's now been days, since a very young man, a 20-year-old man, shot at a former president, and we still don't really know anything about him. Like, we know so he was a registered Republican, but then everything else, because there's been lots of reporting of people, journalists going to talk to people who knew him, people at school, etc., and no one really had anything to say about him, which was very odd. And he also seemed to be the only 20-year-old on Earth who didn't have an internet footprint. So I think that it's still like stuff may come out about him that may end up shaping the discourse in one way or the other. I think that's still the mystery box remaining, I think.
I think one thing that is fairly well attested is that he was found wearing a T-shirt for this YouTube channel called, what's it called, Demolition?
Yeah, it's a gun tuber thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like Demolition Ranch, and it's like guns and blowing stuff up. And this is kind of making me hold out for the idea that it's just lone gun nut rather than sick, deranged liberal, which has been, certain of the kind of MAGA outriders and even senators have been desperate for this to be a liberal tries to kill Trump because that plays into exactly what they want. If it's a John Hinckley attempting to kill the president just to impress people or out of that kind of celebrity sickness that seems to coexist somehow with the gun universe. Horrible though it is, that's a better outcome.
Basically.
Yeah, it's apolitical. Absolutely right.
Yeah, and oddly, it may end up being apolitical because quite a lot of shootings are a plea for attention. Doesn't really matter in a sense, except that the target is extremely well known. It's just the shooter wants
it
the
might end
attention.
up going the other way as well. You know, there is a large contingent of the MAGA 2016 base that's on the far fringes of that movement that feels betrayed and disillusioned with Trump because he didn't deliver the sort of QAnon prophecy and they think he sold them out to the, you know, so it might even be from that side of politics because there is a lot, like if you listen to some of the more right-wing podcasts in the States at the moment, they are quite anti-Trump.
That would boggle my mind if that were to happen. I mean, just as a little kind of side issue, you have to be, you know, whatever you think of Trump, and I loathe the man, you kind of have to be impressed by the presence of mind and the focus that enables somebody after they've been shot to think about the photo opportunity, to stand up, pump their fist.
But isn't the clue a bit in the name though? Humans famously love a fight or flight response. It's, you know, that's quite literally, I don't know, I was slightly frustrated by people going, oh my God, what a statesman, the idea and stuff. And it's like,
I don't think he's a statesman.
No,
I just think he's the
yeah.
power of the narcissism and even just the presence of mind.
No, I think it's more like really basic human brain stuff, isn't it? Again, if you get attacked, you end up in a state of wanting to fight or wanting to run away, and he, you know, ended up on the fighting thing. I don't know. I wasn't particularly the adrenaline rushes, and then you're just like, come on.
I agree. I think
I
that's
would back
also
myself to do the same
over.
as what I'm saying. But
You would back yourself to stand up and pump your fist if your ear
big
got
time.
shot
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
Okay, well, I'm not going to run that experiment.
fine.
I mean, I wouldn't.
Because of work,
but,
I suspect.
because of work.
I wouldn't, but, you know, who cares? I just think it's completely in character for him, especially at one of those rallies. You know, they are a sort of gang, and he's their leader, and he's just been attacked. So he turns to his disciples, and he goes, fight, fight, fight. I mean, that is the most Trump thing ever.
Well, Ros, Trump has said in the speech this week at the RNC that he will bring the country together. It will be a whole different speech to the humdinger he had planned. He told the Washington Examiner, it's going to be a whole different speech now. It is a chance to bring the country together. I was given that chance. He has signally not blamed Biden like people like J.D. Vance did. Is there even a ghost of a chance that missing death by a matter of millimetres might change this person? Because I think for the rest of us, it will be a life-changing, you would be in years of therapy.
Yeah, no, I mean, missing death by COVID certainly didn't do that.
I was thinking exactly that. Didn't we have this conversation?
Yeah,
like
it
3 years
didn't
ago?
do that to Boris
Yeah.
Johnson either, to be fair. I think he has very quickly realised, because Trump is not stupid, the opportunity that this incident presents for him and the image that he could now give himself as if not, you know, clearly he's not a martyr, but someone who has the potential to be a martyr in American politics. And he's been very much, you know, pushing that line. And he's realised just, as I say, what the potential this has to widen his appeal beyond perhaps his base. And that is why he hasn't yet, we will see, as we were discussing earlier, he hasn't yet gone down the full, this was a Dem conspiracy, they were the ones trying to kill me. He hasn't done that. He has tried to appear statesmanlike, and that's because he knows he has his base sewn up. Right? He doesn't need to win over those people. The people he needs to win over are the ones who are hesitating between Biden and Trump. It makes, therefore, perfect sense for him to target them in his response to the attempted assassination.
If he does try to lower the temperature, it is going to be a bit rich, considering that he has raised it more than anyone else. I mean, he's called for rally attendees to beat up protesters. He mocked Nancy Pelosi's husband after he was nearly killed in a hammer attack. He fanned the flames of January the 6th. You know, is there a sense that, like, maybe he might not want to touch that because he's so culpable in so many ways?
No, there isn't. I don't think that there's that at all. I mean, it's not wrong to point that out. It's absolutely right. But let's face it, irony is not the most effective form of political persuasion. Pointing out Trump's hypocrisies in the past has done nothing for the Democrats at all, and I don't think it will do anything good this time either. It's better to stick to the, you know, generic condemnations of violence, which of course is what Biden has been doing, and saying that we settle our differences through the ballot box, not through violence. Simply pointing out that Trump is a massive hypocrite will get you nowhere, sadly.
Marie, there's a degree to which this event has kind of put him beyond criticism in terms of policy as well. Edward Luce at the Financial Times said, almost any criticism of Trump is already being spun by MAGA as an incitement to assassinate him. This is an Orwellian attempt to silence what remains of the effort to stop him from regaining power. Is the campaign now reframed in terms of don't reward political violence, elect Donald Trump?
Oh, God, that's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is annoyingly, I mean, I want to say a good line from the Trump campaign, by which I obviously not mean a good line that I agree with, but a line that is annoyingly quite clever. But also at the same time, I think, especially when you're facing any type of campaign like Donald Trump's, you just can't accept their own terms of engagement, I think, is the thing. And again, I worry that the Dems will probably crack under the pressure a bit and go a bit, oh, God, fine. So, no, I think it is probably something that has to be ignored entirely because it is not, they're not being serious about it. Of course, they do not believe that, Democrat politicians saying, I don't know, we shouldn't build a wall is saying ... and that is why you should try to kill Trump again. Now, they're being entirely disingenuous. So yeah, I think it probably has to be ignored. That's the best of two bad options.
Yeah, but that kind of feigned indignation has been one of the key tools of the entire MAGA project, hasn't it? When I say, I'm going to burn down your house, I mean it metaphorically. Yeah. When you say, I think I need to keep you in my sights, you literally want to kill me. Yeah. There's those double standards.
So I think I go back to that moment of Boris Johnson being elected with a huge majority, and I go back to that particular narrative. The danger, I think, for people like Trump, for narcissists like him, is when they feel invulnerable. It is when they overreach. They are their own worst enemy. And so I mean, like I said, we have very little information on this at the moment, but my sense is from seeing the hot takes coming out, Kate Andrews in The Spectator writing, we're all MAGA now.
What a lot of bollocks that was.
And Tom Harwood, my favourite, saying that Nigel Farage flying out to see Trump is just like Blair flying out to meet George W. Bush after 9/11. And I see that, and it seems to me that this moment has huge potential power. And I think these people tend to overreach when they have a moment of huge potential power. So that photograph that is immensely powerful right now, that's doing the rounds, you're going to see it in tea towels and coasters and mugs and T-shirts. And in the next 4 months, it will lose its power entirely and actually become a completely different thing. So this moment in the hands of someone restrained would be the election over. In the hands of Trump, I'm not sure.
Quite apart from not being killed by a gunman, Trump's look this week is just incredible. Right before we started recording, a federal judge threw out the entire classified documents case against him. Judge Aileen Cannon found that because the special counsel Jack Smith had not been named to the post by the president or confirmed by the Senate, that meant his appointment violated the Constitution, so the whole case is off, which is astonishing. I mean, Trump stored boxes of classified documents next to a toilet in Mar-a-Lago with his mates coming in and out, was showing stuff to people and saying, oh, don't look at this. And the case is dismissed. I mean, there will be an appeal to reinstate the case, but it's, astonishing that what was supposed to be the clearest slam dunk of malpractice is just gone by, I think, a Trump-appointed judge.
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. Cases are won and lost on technicalities all the time. It is up to the state in criminal proceedings to put the case together, and that's as it should be. In any case, the general vibe from all political seers for months has been that these sorts of cases help Trump anyway. So,
but it does show that if you've got you've got tame lawyers and judges sewn up in your favour, then you don't really have to worry so much about the judicial branch of government, and therefore the checks and balances that exist to stop Trump doing exactly what he wants to do are gradually being eroded already.
I found it very funny that one of the outriders in the Republican Party was calling for Joe Biden to be indicted for apparently having incited this thing against Trump. And that was 4 or 5 days after the Supreme Court literally ruled to help Trump that, stuff done in his office as president, he's immune.
It's the Nixon line, isn't it?
So,
the president does it, it's not illegal.
Yeah.
Ros, we were expecting Biden possibly to be gone by now, and we think that this event has basically kind of frozen him in place, that he can't quit. He has to see it through to the end. Is this going to silence the Democrats who still want another candidate?
It may do. It shouldn't. The fact that America can be a violent place and that sometimes Americans try to kill their presidents is not a reason, in my view, to turn away from the difficult reality of the fact that Joe Biden is an elderly man and is visibly fading on occasion. Just don't keep asking swing voters to avoid the evidence of their own eyes. It's not a good look. And I also find Biden's certainty that he is the man who can beat Trump, even while he admits that others could, is very alarming, and it's unworthy of him as such an experienced Democrat politician. Because if Biden had a heart attack tomorrow, which can happen to anyone over 50, but especially a man over 80. It's not in any means out of the question. The Democrats would somehow have to find someone to replace him. They could find someone, and they would find someone. And the fact that he, like many people in his position, has good days and bad days is making it easier for the Democrats to close their eyes to this reality. As Marie said earlier, a senior Democratic source said that they'd resigned themselves to losing the election. That is depressing, that is shameful, that is awful. You should not be thinking like that. A good candidate could absolutely beat Trump.
Marie, one aspect that we haven't really talked about is the speed with which conspiracy theories multiplied around this. Within minutes of the event taking place, the word staged was trending almost immediately on X, at the same time as the political right was trying to fit it into their narrative of persecution and the deep state, and how on earth was a gunman able to get so close? What were the Secret Service doing? Are we now in a world where conspiracy thought is the default reaction, where everything's a false flag and everything's a put up and everything's staged?
Well, I think I may have a slightly controversial view here, which is that I wonder.
We love them.
I wonder if, and I think we're kind of like, I worry that we're talking about two slightly different things of, obviously like big conspiracy theories that develop over days and months and people really care about them and really believe in them. But I think especially in the kind of seconds and minutes and maybe hours after something big like this happened, people will spitball, and I think they always will, in the same way that if you see something shocking happening in the pub and you're with your friends, at least one dickish friend is likely to be like, Lance, do we think that actually happened? Do we think, that there was, some sort of cover-up, whatever? I think a lot of that, I certainly saw friends who, if I were them, I'm not convinced I would have tweeted that at the time, but who were a bit like, come on, that had to be staged. But they were not really being serious. It was a kind of, again, it was just an immediate reaction. So I wonder if a fair bit of that is not just a normal, again, human impulse of being like, as you work through a breaking news event. But obviously more broadly, I do think that, conspiracy theory thinking is an issue. But I'd be wary of, I think, making it seem like a much bigger problem than perhaps it is.
It's still, I'm beginning to think that social media is kind of like people's. It's not their external monologue; it's their inner monologue. Yes. They just bash it down. Whatever comes into your head, bash it down.
Have you seen my Twitter feed? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've seen your Twitter feed. Yeah, but everybody else's as well. It's like the kind of little voice in your head, and you forget that somehow, sometimes hundreds of people are seeing it, but under the right circumstances, tens and hundreds of thousands of people can see it. And that dumb brain fart that you had or I had. Present company accepted, can go around the world and suddenly it looks like a considered opinion.
It's Andrew. Can I recommend the book Escape, written by Marie Lecoq? There is a bit on that, and I think a lot of the tension on social media, and I'm aware that I'm getting slightly off topic here, so I'll keep it short, but the tension is, the brain cannot accept, let's say you've got, 10,000 followers, the brain cannot accept that whenever you're posting a tweet, 10,000 people could see it. Or actually, as you said, maybe millions of people could see it. Now, that's not something we can accept at all, I think, on a really basic level. So there's always going to be that tension.
It still feels like a vaguely private-ish conversation between you and your mates.
It is,
online.
But it's also, I think that, human brain takes its time to evolve. And I would not want to go in front of 100,000 people on a big stage and go, so funny story about my lunch. but somehow I do it every day.
Does it though? Because I do. I do feel that way. I'm very conscious of it. And that's probably why you have many more followers than I do. Because I am constantly aware, partly because I once screwed up massively on Twitter and said something that I shouldn't have done.
Oh, what was it?
Lost a job as a result, which I won't go into. So I am acutely aware of it as a result.
But is it slightly a generational thing as well? Because I think I started blogging when I was 12. So I've never known anything but just being like typing on the internet. And, at 12, no one read my blog. So I think it's just always been that part of me. And I think for lots of people kind of under 35, there's this thing of being like, oh, I've always had a keyboard nearby. And so it doesn't, I don't know.
On the actual topic.
Fine, if we must.
Origin Story did a really good episode on conspiracy theories.
They did.
And one of the things that they said was that they spring from an inability to fit the facts to your existing worldview, effectively. And so I think maybe that is why we're seeing quite a lot of them on the far right, and they're maybe less frequent on the left, because the facts tend to favor, I guess, evidence-based policy and that kind of thing. But the moment something pops up that challenges our understanding of the universe, I think we're just as prone to go, this might have been a pizza place, or it might have been a front for a paedophile ring.
The comfort of conspiracy theories, it says that while the world might be bad, someone's in charge, someone's in control. Yeah. And actually the truth is nobody's in control and everything's chaotic.
But actually, I understand, and other people don't. That's the other thing.
I get it.
I get it. You guys don't, because you're stupid.
You sheeple, yeah. It's nowhere near on the same scale as in the United States. Well, here in Britain, we have seen vicious, intimidatory campaigning in several constituencies in the last general election, mostly over Gaza. The government's advisor on political violence, Lord Wolney, has warned about a concerted campaign by extremists to create a hostile atmosphere for MPs within their constituencies to compel them to cave into political demands. Jess Phillips highlighted this during her count. Shabana Mahmood was also targeted. How do you combat this sort of intimidation and kind of the threat of violence, if not the actuality of violence, without platforming it, without giving it the spotlight, and in that respect kind of validating it?
And targeting women in particular is another thing that needs to be noted. I think by clarifying the rules and giving Ofcom and the Electoral Commission proper powers, I find it just extraordinary that grifters operate in this kind of grey space between what's allowed and what's not allowed. The fact that there is no recourse against Susan Hall just making up road signs that don't exist or issuing people with fake penalty notices is insane to me. That MPs are allowed to have shows on news channels where they interview fellow MPs from the same party, and as if it's anything other than a party political broadcast, or that a doctored audio of West Streeting or Keir Starmer can be doing the rounds of WhatsApp, which WhatsApp incidentally could stop with the press of a button, but no one has the power to tell it.
This is all true, but what we're talking about here is actual violence, intimidatory violence, where people having their tyres slashed while campaigning for Jess Phillips, women being chased down the street. I mean,
but isn't that the point? Isn't that the whole principle and theory behind zero tolerance policies? That if you create a licentious atmosphere in which people push at the boundaries and anything goes, you get occasionally people that push far beyond the boundaries. And the only solution to that is to make the boundaries crystal clear. I mean, I would do it like football. I would just dock them votes. Like this kind of malicious, misrepresentation on your leaflet, you lose 1,000 votes.
So yes, it's been a horrible weekend, but if there are villains about, then that means there are heroes as well. And we're going to choose them in our weekly feature, helpfully entitled Heroes and Villains. Who is this week's miracle-working Cole Palmer, and who is the preening Cristiano Ronaldo that we all love to hate? The panel nominate them, and I will then make a choice. Marie, hero and villain.
Well, so actually, as it happens, my hero is Cole Palmer. But
Oh,
also
right,
not
okay.
for the reason, not for the reason you think. And obviously for that goal, because it was amazing. But no, what I really like about Cole Palmer, and I feel like I chewed so many people's ears off on this, is that he's mixed race. Obviously on a personal note, it's so nice to see finally a mixed race person who's looking even whiter than me.
When is mixed race going to get a team in the Euros? That's what I don't know. You know.
Yeah. But yeah, so his dad's family is from St Kitts and Nevis, and he actually wore a little flag, I think, of like St Kitts and Nevis on the side of his boot, which I really liked. And I think it's just like really nice, again, as someone who's mixed race but white passing, to have representation at the highest level. We exist and we're real. So I thought that was
Very
nice.
nice.
And also,
Okay.
that was a sick goal.
Strong entry. Right, who's your villain?
My villain, I've gone for like a slightly lighter one this week, is the Federal Democratic Union of Switzerland, a right-wing party in Switzerland, who are furious that Switzerland won Eurovision and is now going to host Eurovision. So they've been trying, they don't have that many seats, so they can't actually really do anything at the national level, but obviously Switzerland is very decentralised, so they're going to try and organise some budget referendums in all the potential host cities to try and stop them from organising Eurovision. But mostly, so like the quote I really enjoyed was, "A country that provides a stage to such disgusting trash won't elevate its image, but merely showcase its own intellectual decline."
That's the most joyless thing I've ever heard in my
I
life.
No, right. It's a shame, really, because I mean, Switzerland is in many ways the perfect place for Eurovision.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pure kitsch on many levels.
Yeah.
It is. It's actually quite
And
a camp. Yeah.
trilingual.
Yeah, he'll try anything, yeah. Ross, who's your hero and who's your villain?
My hero is actually Cory Comparator, who was the volunteer fire chief at the Trump rally, who died protecting his family. He threw himself onto them to protect them. And he was apparently very much looking forward to the rally. And it just goes, perhaps it should go without saying, but not all Trump supporters are bad people.
Well, his
It is
neighbours were
possible.
saying that like he was a Trump supporter, but he was open to other people's opinions and a reasonable guy to talk to. And it's a moment of actual heroism.
Yeah, it is. It is. My villain, I'm afraid I've almost certainly chosen this villain before. And it's not the first time we've even mentioned him in this podcast. It's probably about 10th. I'm afraid it's Nigel Farage again. It's just the fact that he lost no time at all in making hay from the shooting. It was immediately almost all about him. And the sheer cynicism and unpleasantness of that guy just never ends.
Okay, a strong entry, but I sort of think that, trying to enter Nigel Farage as the villain of the week is kind of like he's bound to get.
I'm sorry.
Take it as red.
Villain of the
But
year.
I just feel we just have to. Now he's in Parliament, Andrew. We need to acknowledge his pure evil.
Okie doke.
When we do an Ogwen 10th anniversary special, we go for villain of the decade. I
you
think
go.
Nigel has it sewn up.
Alex, your entries.
So my villain are internet sleuths in general. TikTokers and
You said that with such disdain.
but
like
seriously though,
TikTokers.
they just found the body of that teenager, Jay Slater, in Tenerife, and apparently everything has been made 100 times worse by people just turning up, posting theories about him, wild theories, which are then amplified by tabloids. I mean, The Sun yesterday had a choice saying a chilling new Jay Slater theory has been revealed, speculating the teen could be alive and have secretly boarded a yacht. And they got it entirely off a blog.
Like everything's like an ITV1 crap
And
drama.
we saw it with Michael Mosley. We saw it with, very notably, with Nicola Bulley.
Yeah.
Where people, and just fucking stop it now. Just let the authorities do their fucking job. You're not Miss Marple.
Such a Metropolitan Elite idea, Alex.
No,
Let the authorities
seriously,
do their
though,
jobs.
it is incredibly hurtful to the families.
It's horrible.
Involved.
And ghoulish as well.
Just stay out of it.
So that's your villain.
And my hero, I'm amazed no one's done Southgate, but I guess we can talk about him in part 2 because he's certainly a hero. But my hero of the week will be the single England supporter who turned up at Stansted this morning with a massive England flag to wave it at the lads coming back. And I salute you, man, whoever you are, because I don't know why the expectations that we have as a country mean that somehow runner-up to the best team on the continent, if not the world, seems like somehow a terrible result. And so whoever you were, turned up at Stansted. I salute you.
Okay, the adjudication is yay for Cole Palmer, yay for flag guy, but I'm going to give it to the guy at the Trump rally who was killed for the simple thing that, like, in a hail of bullets to turn around and throw yourself on top of your family, that's proper heroism, and we should recognise that. Villain. Well, it can't be Farage because he'd win it every week if it was allowed it to be Farage. So I'm going to give it to bloody internet sleuths digging their way through people's private business, dabbling their fingers in the stuff of people's souls. Stop doing it. You cannot work out where a missing person is from sitting at your desk with a cup of tea with a cat on your knee. The double bounce of a brand new government and an England victory in the Euros seemed like too much to ask for, and it was, with the England men's team outplayed and outthought by a far better side, Spain, in the final in Berlin on Sunday night. An audience of 23.8 million people were watching on TV. So the worst, most self-pitying cliche in football, 30 years of hurt, for the blokes at least, now extends to 58 years, and the next World Cup in 2026 at least. It was a muted exit from a muted campaign, but in the past, footballing success has sometimes reflected well on the politicians who happen to be around to take advantage. Harold Wilson basked in the 1966 World Cup, and England's strong performance in Euro 96 seemed to presage the optimism of the 1997 election. But John Major didn't make much capital out of Italian 90 and Gazza's tears, nor did the last government gain any credit from the Lionesses' victory in Euro 2022. So when does sporting success work for politicians and when does it not work? And does the idea of a national feel-good factor become real if enough of us believe in it? Scotland, Wales and Ireland listeners, yes, we will be talking about those countries, so please hold your tweets. Marie, for impartiality, I'm going to start with a French person. Do we, the English, overinvest in the national team for our sense of self-worth?
Oh, that's actually a really tough question. In that sort of, but I don't know, because I find the English attitude towards your football team really fascinating. And I say that as actually, an England supporter since 2018. Gareth Southgate wore me down, which I'm still really annoyed about. It is that weird thing where on the one hand, like one thing I do respect is the fact that people, because like in France, because we're, no offence, more used to winning at football. No, but I think we do have a different attitude of being like, we should win, we expect to win. I think, England, there's a sense of being that, but we're there actually for the camaraderie, for watching the games, for the brilliant moments and the surprises, etc., which I think, again, other countries may not have. But at the same time, as Alex was pointing out as well, like there's so much resentment, when England doesn't win. Even if it does well, like there's a sense that England fans will never, ever be happy. There was someone doctored, thought was really funny, that I photoshopped Gareth Southgate, Guardian column, being like, when will you fuckers ever be happy? Like, it's just,
I have a suspicion that it's actually a hangover from the kind of the Thatcher era that you're always a customer, and that the England team is some kind of nationalised industry that's not delivering, and I'm going to bang my fist on the desk.
He's objectively the best England manager in 50 years.
If we had one, and England had, England fans had gone berserk in the streets, would that have been off-brand for the country? Would it have been wrong? Because actually, baked into the brand is you nearly get there and you stand there having a good old cry on a street corner once every 2 years. Middle-aged men can finally let their emotions flow as they never can before.
I think I sort of want to believe. I think people probably would have been happy. I think there would have been some whinging of going, oh, well, the games are still quite boring, obviously. But no, I think people would have been quite pleased, which is why it's quite sad that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, oh well.
As football fans, do we sometimes see patterns in football and kind of resonances and relevance to the outside world that aren't really there? Like England are doing well, that means the country is doing well.
I don't know, because I do think it can contribute to the national narrative, right? And I think this would have been very symbolic. I think, kind of like new Labour government coming in the summer, and shit weather, but still the summer technically. England winning its first tournament in a very long time. I think there would have been, kind of shift in mood a bit, even among people who don't really watch football, just like a little change in the air. Like one of those things you can't really explain. But then again, I like football, so maybe ask the question to people who don't.
You don't like football. A person who doesn't like football, Roz, you think this is complete nonsense, don't you? And sport has no relevance whatsoever to politics.
Not much, no. I think it's a politics effect on sport. It's not a sport effect on politics. I think, speaking as someone of the outside looking in, right, because I didn't even watch the match last night, The story of English football, it feels like a story of a yearning for continued relevance in the world, and also an acknowledgement of how much England has contributed to the world. That's why you have the whole, it's coming home stuff. And it's become more progressive, English football, Black Lives Matter, taking the knee, all that. But that is actually part and parcel of its search for relevance and acknowledgement. It's saying, yeah, we can adapt, but we really like to win just for old time's sake. And it's the story of England's defeat, like last night, is always the story of not being top dog anymore. But that's okay, because Spain actually did play better, which, as far as I can tell, they did. And that's okay. And a sort of reconciliation to your own relative irrelevance. It's so this kind of idea that sport has an effect on politics is, I think, a myth perpetuated by people who are into both politics and sport, among whom have been many senior politicians, one of whom is now our Prime Minister, mostly men, by the way. And they see...
Lisa Nandy was wearing an England shirt.
Yeah, women can like football too, I know that. And they can even play it, I understand now.
They did quite well.
And they see, even better than men, I think, anyway. And they see common values in the idea of a team pulling together for their country, lots in common with a good political, cabinet, blah, blah, blah. Nothing wrong with that. Go ahead, absolutely. But for the great majority of the public, I think the comparison is irrelevant. And it doesn't mean that they can't feel good about their country for a while if we win, but I don't think it influences their votes. I don't think there's any kind of political vibes at all.
Are we the only country in the world that sits around wondering whether it's good or bad to feel good about your country?
Yes, probably I think we are. But Marie, what do you think?
France and Greece, what do you have to say? Do the French lacerate themselves about their patriotism?
No, so I think, and actually weirdly, I think this tournament was a bit of a, well, no, it wasn't really an exception. I think we're either really good or really quite shit. Like, there's not really an in-between with France. I think in a really weird, sick and twisted way, I think my favourite France game was when we got out against Switzerland at the last Euros, because we just played like the kind of like epitome of French football playing. So we played very well at the beginning, and I think so was it like we got 3 goals in. So I think it ended up being, I can't remember like the details, like 3-1 or something, but played really well. And was it like, Pogba does that thing in front of the camera when he scores a goal where he looks really smug and kind of like nods at the camera and stuff. So, ice cold. And then Switzerland, was like scoring. And we were like, we're French, who gives a shit about little Switzerland? Anyway, went to extra time, went to fucking pens, and then we lost. and that was such a beautiful, we're going to play really well, but because we're just really dickish, we're going to lose anyway.
Knocked out in a very French way. I liked it when you won the World Cup and astounded the world, and everybody was looking at France again, this is incredible. And then the entire team's organisation fell apart in internecine squabbling, after the revolution. They were very nearly guillotining one another. It was so French.
Exactly. So I think we're either on top of the world or we're shit. But it's weirdly part of the fun, I think. You never know what you're going to get. But even this team was a bit weird, because we had some really good players, but it kind of looked like, especially at the beginning of the group stage, we had all these great players who'd been hit on the head and could not remember who the other ones were. Yes. We just played really weirdly, and it's a bit like, and I swear we used to be good at football. In
1998, when France won the World Cup, it was supposed to be the arrival of a brand new France, a brand new, multicultural, at ease with itself, beautifully harmonised players from all backgrounds and all parts of the Francosphere universe. And it didn't quite play out like that. We've now have France that's very divided and in turmoil and in crisis. Did the kind of promises that were loaded onto that World Cup, do you think in any way kind of contribute to the way France became more divided?
So I'm going to be entirely honest with you. I was 6 years old.
That's no excuse.
Although that is literally my first football memory.
Never miss an opportunity. Stick the knife in.
No, to be fair, that is it's quite funny. It's my first football memory, and because we were on holiday with my parents, and I was allowed to stay late and watch the game, and there was a rattan couch there, which I was holding onto for dear life because I'd never really watched football. I was very stressed, and I think it was the second goal where I managed to rip off half the couch. And so I got sent to my room, and I didn't get to see the third goal, and I'm still furious. I'm fucking
6-year-old football hooligan.
So but no, so I don't really so I think so I'm going to agree with Roz, I think, but also See, I think football alone can't change a country's vibes, positively or negatively, really. I think that if maybe we'd had a political sphere at the time who'd been like, okay, actually, we can embrace this, we can embrace the fact that, again, it was a very kind of ethnically diverse team, etc., then maybe we can, usher some new era forward. But Jacques Chirac was the president then, and he was who he was, and he was, that's all I can say about that.
That's the best thing I've heard about Jacques Chirac.
Well,
I mean, what else can you really say about him? Yeah.
Alex, Greece winning the Euros in 2004 was one of the most astonishing victories, and did really seem
to none more so than Greece.
Yeah, well, all the Greeks I know,
including the team.
How in the hell did that happen? It was fantastic. It was it was like Leicester City winning the Premier League. It was outsiders winning, but it really did seem to reflect on. It seemed to sort of change the country a little bit and sort of inject a degree of confidence. Tell us how it played out.
Well, I think because of the way it happened, and I think that's where England have done very well. The defining aspect of that Greek win in 2004 was that individually they weren't big superstars, but somehow together there was something about them as a unit that made them defensively impenetrable and sort of never said die. And, they were more than the sum of their parts, which I think is what made them so important in Greece. They weren't particularly important politically because we just had an election, March 2004. And so all of that had happened, as it were. The Olympics also came back to Athens that summer. And so it really was a time when Greeks were genuinely just filled with pride to be Greek. Enormous investment had happened. The Athens Metro, which is still, I think, one of the most beautiful
It's a really nice metro.
Metros. And the problem with that is that then 4 years later, the global financial crisis happened, and it was really at a bad time for a country that had just overextended itself.
And that's the end of the show. So before we go, Escape Routes, our regular look at the books, films, TV, music, or whatever that keep our minds off politics, and this week we really need it. Ros, what's your escape route?
Well, this is a whatever because it's actually about politics, but it's not about this job. So I went on a business trip to Brussels last week and they gave me a tour of the European Parliament. It was very exciting for a sad nerd like me. And it did keep my mind off British politics. I was slightly wound down a bit after the excitement of the election. And it was really nice to hear Europeans saying things like, oh, your country, it's turned a corner now. Now you're doing sensible stuff. It was also quite poignant because despite the obvious shortcomings of the Parliament, we used to be a part of that. We're not anymore. Looking around it felt a bit strange as a result.
Well, I mean, if you want to get away from British politics, go to the headquarters of the European Union.
Yeah, exactly.
Alex, how about you?
So it's a sort of paid forward. Because I'm watching Elementary again because of Marie's escape route. I mean, I'm 4 episodes in the first season. It is both better and slightly worse than I remember.
So I think it gets better with time.
No. Yeah. It will. I know that. But also, Johnny Lee Miller, slightly less hot than I remember.
Oh, I disagree.
Lucy Liu's slightly even more hot than I remember.
Is that
hot?
It's just astonishing. But no, there's something about they really sell us Johnny Lee as a sex symbol in a way that sort of today feels a bit ham-fisted. Like he's constantly stripped to the waist with a nipple next to the camera. And it's like,
no, I hate it.
We get it. We get it.
Marie, what's your escape route?
So I've been reading City of Night by John Recchi, I don't know how you pronounce it, which is a slightly random charity shop find. And absolutely, I think, genuinely on course to become one of my favourite books of all time. So written in the early 60s by this man who was of Mexican heritage, gay, and it's heavy. and is heavily influenced by his own life, where essentially I think he travelled around the US a lot when he was a young man, essentially being a gay escort, and is just chronicling the kind of life of the different gay scenes across the US in the early 60s. And is just like, the prose is incredible. All the characters, like many of whom apparently were, real people, are amazing. It's also really interesting to see how much of kind of like gay and drag culture, etc., slang is actually like decades and decades old. Like so many of the words they use is exactly what they would say on Drag Race now, which I find really interesting. And but yeah, no, just a very curious and quite unique book. But yeah, would really recommend it. It's very long. So yeah, I've been reading it for a few weeks, but yeah, it's very good.
So it's on the road, but gay.
Basically, yeah, and also good. Sorry to be on the road, but
Well, mine is possibly in theme with that. It's a book called 1984, The Year Pop Went Queer, by friend of the podcast, Ian Wade. He's done a kind of historical investigation of the year, which was kind of a turning point for pop music because there was a huge influx of gay and gay-influenced pop. Some of my favourites, like Frankie Goes to Hollywood and the Pet Shop Boys, but also Queen, George Michael, Madonna. It is the kind of watershed where the modern pop world comes into being, and where the centre moves from, the rock show and the guy with the guitar to the club and the remix and the dance tune. It's kind of both sort of just the beginning, sort of, AIDS has begun and is starting to affect the gay world. It's also starting to affect musicians, but also kind of on the horizon is like this kind of beautiful future of raves and house music, where all of the euphoria of this sort of gay pop that was part of the gay world is going to come out for everybody else. And it's really interesting, and it's kind of inspiring, and it's got a great cover, and it's called 1984, The Year Pop Went Queer. It's sort of like a riposte to David Hepworth's 1973, which is all about that's kind of like the straight guys when music becomes great, and this is like the gay version of when music becomes incredible, and it's worth reading. And that is the podcast. Thank you, Russ Taylor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie Leconte.
Thank you.
And thank you, Alex Andreou.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, listeners. We'll be back later in the week with another edition.
Hello and welcome aboard to Keith Horton, Lomax Fairchild, Jerry Palmer, Andy Harris, Owen Adams, and PK Taylor.
Greetings from me, and thanks for your generosity to Andrew McCabe, Katrina Walsh, Ben, Liam Connolly, Jay Thompson, and DM.
And hello from me, and a big thanks to Daniel Hauser, Alice Webster, Scott Aldridge, Amanda, and to returning backers Frank Power and Ingrid Sigerson.
And hello from me to all of these returning backers who've all rejoined the Ogwen Army for our exciting new era of politics. Hello to Susan Van de Ven, Andrew Fordham, Helen Megginson, Emma L., Laureline Van Capel, and Mark Harrison. No relation. We'll see you next time.